I have but little more to say, sir, but lest there should be even now lurking in your mind a vague hope that, having written this letter, you could easily in the future deny its authorship, let me tell you this: my measures are well taken. There will be witnesses to your writing of it. You will sit here in this room, unfettered, uncoerced in any way, and the money spoken of in the letter will be handed over to you by my colleague, after a few suitable words spoken by him, and you will take the money from him, Sir Percy, and the witnesses will see you take it, after having seen you write the letter. They will understand that you are being paid by the French Government for giving information anent royalist plots in this country and in England. They will understand that your identity as the leader of that so-called band is not only known to me and to my colleague, but that it also covers your real character and profession as the paid spy of France." "Marvellous, I call it, demmed marvellous," quoth Sir Percy blandly. Chauvelin had paused, half choked by his own emotion, his hatred and prospective revenge. He passed his handkerchief over his forehead, which was streaming with perspiration. "Warm work, this sort of thing, eh, Monsieur Chaubertin?" queried his imperturbable enemy. Marguerite said nothing. The whole thing was too horrible for words, but she kept her large eyes fixed upon her husband's face, waiting for that look, that sign from him which would have eased the agonizing anxiety in her heart, and which never came. With a great effort now, Chauvelin pulled himself together, and though his voice still trembled, he managed to speak with a certain amount of calm. "Probably, Sir Percy, you know," he said, "that throughout the whole of France we are inaugurating a series of national fetes in honour of the new religion which the people are about to adopt. Demoiselle Desiree Candeille, whom you know, will at these festivals impersonate the goddess of reason, the only deity whom we now admit in France. She has been specially chosen for this honour, owing to the services which she has rendered us recently. And as Boulogne happens to be the lucky city in which we have succeeded in bringing the Scarlet Pimpernel to justice, the national fete will begin within these city walls, with Demoiselle Candeille as the thrice-honoured goddess. And you will be very merry here in Boulogne, I dare swear." "Aye, merry, sir," said Chauvelin with an involuntary and savage snarl, as he placed a long claw-like finger upon the momentous paper before him, "merry, for we here in Boulogne will see that which will fill the heart of every patriot in France with gladness. Nay, 'twas not the death of the Scarlet Pimpernel we wanted, not the noble martyrdom of England's chosen hero, but his humiliation and defeat, derision and scorn, contumely and contempt. You asked me airily just now, Sir Percy, how I proposed to accomplish this object. Well, you know it now. By forcing you, aye, forcing, to write and sign a letter, and to take money from my hands, which will brand you forever as a liar and informer, and cover you with the thick and slimy mud of irreclaimable infamy." "Lud, sir," said Sir Percy pleasantly, "what a wonderful command you have of our language. I wish I could speak French half as well." Marguerite had risen like an automaton from her chair. She felt that she could no longer sit still. She wanted to scream out at the top of her voice all the horror that she felt for this dastardly plot, which surely must have had its origin in the brain of devils. She could not understand Percy. This was one of those awful moments which she had been destined to experience once or twice before, when the whole personality of her husband seemed to become shadowy before her, to slip, as it were, past her comprehension, leaving her indescribably lonely and wretched, trusting yet terrified. She thought that long ere this he would have flung back every insult in his opponent's teeth. She did not know what inducements Chauvelin had held out in exchange for the infamous letter, what threats he had used. That her own life and freedom were at stake was of course evident, but she cared nothing for life, and he should know that certainly she would care still less if such a price had to be paid for it. She longed to tell him all that was in her heart, longed to tell him how little she valued her life, how highly she prized his honour. But how could she, before this fiend who snarled and sneered in his anticipated triumph? And surely, surely Percy knew. And knowing all that, why did he not speak? Why did he not tear that infamous paper from out of that devil's hands and fling it in his face? Yet though her loving ear caught every intonation of her husband's voice, she could not detect the slightest harshness in his airy laugh. His tone was perfectly natural, and he seemed to be, indeed, just as he appeared, vastly amused. Then she thought that perhaps he would wish her to go now, that he felt desire to be alone with this man who had outraged him in everything that he held most holy and most dear, his honour and his wife, that perhaps, knowing that his own temper was no longer under control, he did not wish her to witness the rough and ready chastisement which he was intending to mete out to this dastardly intriguer. Yes, that was it, no doubt. Herein she could not be mistaken. She knew his fastidious notions of what was due and proper in the presence of a woman, and that even at a moment like this, he would wish the manners of London drawing-rooms to govern his every action. Therefore she rose to go, and as she did so, once more tried to read the expression in his face, to guess what was passing in his mind. "Nay, madam," he said, whilst he bowed gracefully before her, "I fear me this lengthy conversation hath somewhat fatigued you. This merry jest twixt my engaging friend and myself should not have been prolonged so far into the night. Monsieur, I pray you, will you not give orders that her ladyship be escorted back to her room?" He was still standing outside the circle of light, and Marguerite instinctively went up to him. For this one second she was oblivious of Chauvelin's presence. She forgot her well-schooled pride, her firm determination to be silent and to be brave. She could no longer restrain the wild beatings of her heart, the agony of her soul, and with sudden impulse she murmured in a voice broken with intense love and subdued with passionate appeal: "Percy!" He drew back a step further into the gloom. This made her realise the mistake she had made in allowing her husband's most bitter enemy to get this brief glimpse into her soul. Chauvelin's thin lips curled with satisfaction. The brief glimpse had been sufficient for him. The rapidly whispered name, the broken accent, had told him what he had not known hitherto, namely, that between this man and woman there was a bond far more powerful than that which usually existed between husband and wife, and merely made up of chivalry on the one side and trustful reliance on the other. Marguerite, having realised her mistake, ashamed of having betrayed her feelings even for a moment, threw back her proud head and gave her exultant foe a look of defiance and of scorn. He responded with one of pity, not altogether unmixed with deference. There was something almost unearthly and sublime in this beautiful woman's agonizing despair. He lowered his head and made her a deep obeisance, lest she should see the satisfaction and triumph which shone through his pity. As usual, Sir Percy remained quite imperturbable, and now it was he who, with characteristic impudence, touched the handbell on the table. "Excuse this intrusion, monsieur," he said lightly. "Her ladyship is over-fatigued and would be best in her room." Marguerite threw him a grateful look. After all, she was only a woman, and was afraid of breaking down. In her mind there was no issue to the present deadlock save in death. For this she was prepared, and had but one great hope, that she could lie in her husband's arms just once again before she died. Now, since she could not speak to him, scarcely dared to look into the loved face, she was quite ready to go. In answer to the bell, the soldier had entered. "If Lady Blakeney desires to go," said Chauvelin. She nodded, and Chauvelin gave the necessary orders. Two soldiers stood at attention, ready to escort Marguerite back to her prison cell. As she went towards the door, she came to within a couple of steps from where her husband was standing, bowing to her as she passed. She stretched out an icy cold hand towards him, and he, in the most approved London fashion, with the courtly grace of a perfect English gentleman, took the little hand in his, and stooping very low, kissed the delicate fingertips. Then only did she notice that the strong, nervy hand which held hers trembled perceptibly, and that his lips, which for an instant rested on her fingers, were burning hot. End of chapter 26.